Good evening, and welcome to the Bookstore at the Berry Center. My name is Virginia Berry Aguilar, and I am the director of the Agrarian Culture Center and Bookstore here at the Berry Center in Newcastle, Kentucky. The Berry Center was founded a little over a decade ago in order to put my grandfather, Wendell Berry's writings to work, advocating for farmers, land-conserving communities, and healthy regional economies. And we are so pleased to be joined this evening by two people who embody that good work in their own places. Our special guest tonight is Lake District farmer, businesswoman, teacher, conservationist, mother, cook, and author, Helen Rebanks. Helen's new book, The Farmer's Wife, My Life in Days, is one of our most anticipated books of the year. In telling her story, Helen has shown a light on the lives and the work of women who have often gone undervalued and unsung. These are rural women who are doing the essential work of nurturing, supporting, and bringing beauty to their place and their people. This is an important book that we highly recommend. Joining Helen tonight will be our mutual friend, Minooka, Illinois' own Nick Offerman. You may recognize Nick from his many roles on stage and screen, or from one of his fine books, like Where the Deer and the Antelope Play and Good Clean Fun. Nick has been an outspoken supporter of our work here at the Berry Center, a strong voice for rural places and economies everywhere. And we are so glad to have him with us tonight to host this conversation. If you are interested in getting your own copy of The Farmer's Wife or giving one as a gift, you can find it at berrycenterbookstore.com. And while you are here, click the follow or subscribe button for more, or sign up for our newsletter and mailing list at berrycenter.org. Thank you again for your interest in the good and vital work of rural renewal that we do here every day at the Berry Center. We hope you will enjoy this chat between distant neighbors and great friends on opposite sides of the Atlantic, and that you will join us for more events like this one in the future. Please join me in welcoming Helen Rebanks and Nick Offerman.
Thank you very much, Virginia, for that generous introduction. I'm so glad to be here and happy to welcome you all here to what promises to be a very savory chat with my dear friend Helen Rebanks. Hello, Helen. Please tell us what temperature it is and where we find you this evening.
Hello, Nick. Yes, lovely to see you. And thank you, Virginia, for that. That's really kind. I'm in the end of the sheep shed. It's about -2 degrees outside. We've had snow last week. It's melted, and now there's sort of rivers of ice running down the lane. So it's a bit treacherous outside. So yeah, all is good.
I'm glad you're inside in the warm. A quick anecdote. The first time I came to stay with you all, it was January of 2019, and I got there and it was freezing, sleeting rain. And James, your husband, immediately took me out into a pasture to help him mend a stone wall that had been knocked down by some sheep. And by the time I got to bed, he brought me into this apartment, which is very cold. It looks very civilized. I mean, you could be in Manhattan, but if people could, I wish we could give a quick tour, because it's actually built onto the end of the sheep barn. It's quite practical. But he brought me in. It was late at night and it was freezing cold. And he said, well, here's the apartment. Here's a little wood burning stove, which we see over your shoulder. And he began to show me how to use the stove. And he said, what am I thinking? You're Nick Offerman. You'll be fine. And he said, good night. And I was like, what does that mean? I still need warmth and, food and water. But I managed to get a fire going eventually. But people tend to overestimate me. Anyway, I'm so excited to talk to you about your book. Please, I guess my first question would be, you live in a household with a writer named James Rebanks, who has a couple of books that people consider perfectly serviceable. And he's a well-spoken, middle-aged white guy. So why in the world did you think we needed any more books off of your property?
Well, we needed another book that was about the women of this world, because James has written very well about all of the things that the shepherds do and the farmers do outside on the land, and how we've worked to change the farm essentially from how it was managed previously. But we didn't hear much from my side of things, of how it feels to be that support, as essentially, really. And I started the project in 2020 when life was really quite different for all of us through the pandemic year. And I wanted to put together a collection of recipes that was something that would be mum's legacy, passed down for the children, and from my point of view, what it feels like to do the work I do every day. And I don't wake up and think, are the cows okay and the sheep? Unless James isn't here. That isn't my domain. He takes that responsibility on of the grazing and the moving the cattle, gathering the sheep off the fells, mending the stone walls, which he's very grateful for a helping hand, and fencing and such like. But my job is essentially looking after the children and looking after the home and cooking for us all, and welcoming visitors in and hosting groups and cooking for big groups, sometimes up to about 70 people we've had in this sheep shed. It's bigger than it looks. It's got another bay out there, and then there's a place where we can put trestle tables and host visitors and make big pans of stew or broth and things. And I love cooking, and I love how food brings people together. So that's my whole world. And my book was it was just to explain all of that work, really, and to champion it, and to, write about women's history, really, to honor the women I'm from as much as anything.
Well, thank you. And for those of you tuning in that aren't super familiar with me, I'll just comfort you by pointing out that I'm a total smartass. And I ask that leading question because the reason I'm even here or involved at all with the Berry Center is because when I first read the fiction of Wendell Berry, it reminded me so much of my own family and the work that my mom and dad and their parents all do. My mom and dad both grew up on farms in our little town, Minooka, Illinois. And so reading Wendell's work, for example, and talking to you and what your book is pointing out, the sort of quiet, unsung heroes, the glue of any farming family traditionally, is the mom, and the wife, there's the farmer who wakes up thinking, are the cows and sheep okay? And then there's the partner who wakes up thinking, is everybody okay? Is everybody covered? There's the guy who has to go deal with the cows and the sheep, but then there's the four kids. And so you're the glue, you're the hub of the whole operation. But at the same time, you're also one of the team members. So you have a household of 6 people, and anybody can be called upon at any time to fix a tire, to help a tangled up twin lamb be born, out on a hillside. So your hats are so many, and it reminds me very much. I'm lucky enough to have a heroic mom like yourself, and so. I want to mention this wonderful short story of Wendell's called "A Jonquil for Mary Penn." I believe that I didn't look this up; it's been a while, but I believe that's the story of Mary Penn she's sick and she's in for a day, and she's a young farm wife who's been brought into this community, and she's reminiscing about how all of these Helen Rebanks characters who just traditionally take care of the whole community. They make sure everybody is clothed and fed, and they have the burden of responsibility, minding the books. I mean, what unsung heroism just in that task alone, keeping the books of the farm. While James is off, it's something we see on your social media. James will be at a cattle sale and you two are communicating via Twitter or Instagram. And he's like, no, I'll keep my hands in my pockets today. And you're at home keeping the checkbook. And so through beautiful stories like a Jonquil for Mary Penn, where similarly, she's thinking about all of the generous teaching and coddling and, just the generous handing down of this torch that you bear through the farm wives is what made me fall in love with Wendell Berry's writing, the Berry Center, all of their operations, their beef operation, their farming operation. And through following that's what first brought me to discover James when he was doing his book tour and you all were in Louisville together. And then I got to come and meet you. And almost immediately in your household, I said, oh, I know this superhero. I grew up with this superhero and I know what to do. How I offer my help to you. And so I'm so thrilled when you then, I got to know you, and when you were young, you wanted to become an artist and you did some art school, I believe. And then your life choices ended up, in this much different life perhaps than your art school dreams. But from my point of view, I very much have watched you for some years now, making an incredible work of art out of your life and your family, in a very moving and substantial way. And so when you said that you were going to write this book, I was very excited because I'm a big fan of your artistry, but I had no idea. I could have had no idea. Almost as soon as I started reading it, I was in tears. I was so moved because of what you've said, of how you want to represent this whole side of the beautiful efforts, the regenerative farming, and the attention that you and your family pay to farming in as healthy a way as possible, and providing food and wool, and also taking care of your land, all of in as an agrarian way as possible, which is so aligned with the sort of Berry Center ethos. And so, I mean, what have you found? So when I read your book, I said, I knew, like, I'm your friend and your fan. I knew I was going to love this, just like I love the meals that you put out, or the outings that you take me and your kids on. I'm an honorary fifth kid, maybe. And but I could have had no idea that your book is so beautifully written. There's such simple poetry to it, and I wonder, how has the general reaction been? Talk about how people have responded once your book got out to the world.
Oh, thank you, Nick. It's amazing to hear you talk about, just the journey we've been on as friends and how we've connected, and through, our mutual love for Wendell's writing. And just to go back a step before I talk about the reaction to my book, one of the books that Ben and Virginia sent us very kindly is Tanya's book for the hog killing. And I think you'll know this, the book of photographs really well. And I just wanted to say this made me laugh so much when I first read the introduction. And I'm going to just read a little bit from it, and then I'll go back to mine. But this was hugely inspirational to me, that Tanya's work was presented in a book, and Wendell wrote the introduction. And he says here, because these photographs were made by Tanya Berry, they're extraordinarily intimate and revealing. Intimate because Tanya was one of us, and so nobody was distracted by her presence. And revealing because she knew the people and understood the work in its several stages, and she took part in our pleasure in working together. She knew what we meant by what we did. It is noticeable that our second day of work was not as completely photographed as our first day. That is because on the second day, the photographer herself was busy at other work. The first day's work was accomplished almost entirely by the men, who after all needed to show that they were good for something. After only one day, the men needed the help of the women, which is about what you would expect. And I love that because it's how things work here. And it's language that we can understand, that there's certain jobs that have been divided up, and Tanya's photographs document this. And I thought with writing my book, I would add to the work that James had put out there in the world and share kind of how it feels to be that support role that I said before. And the reactions have been just incredible. And they make me cry sometimes because they're so emotional, because people are writing to me and saying, this is like my life. This is the first time I've seen my life described on the page. This is that mental juggle I hold. And I haven't held back about it. This is not some rosy, wonderful, cozy fireside story here. This is a kind of birth and death and life. It's the stuff of relationships and connection, and what underpins it all is the food. That's what my days revolve around. And when I've written about, the hard times as well as the good times, people are writing to me saying, thank you. Just genuinely thank you for sharing what you've shared. It makes me feel less sort of isolated, that I'm going through the same kind of struggles as this, or that I might not feel appreciated in the wider world, but I know I'm appreciated by my family, and all sorts of messages about feeling seen. When I first signed up the book contract with in the UK with my editor, she said she felt that this was a book about invisible women. And I didn't realize at that point, early on in writing it, that that's what I really wanted to tackle. That in this, busy, noisy world where there's lots of people chasing around to be individuals in their own right, there isn't the voice of somebody that's making a home and looking after the children represented very often. I guess I didn't see myself in many books, so I wrote one. that's where it headed. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad you did, as are we all. It's such a funny world that requires, every conversation requires nuance, which is something we talk about around your dinner table quite often, because you and James are both very vocal in the conversation about food and about farming and about just healthy meat and about caring for your soil more than your bank account. But all of these things have to be taken into account. Your farm can't exist without some attention to your profits. But at the same time, you're vastly invested in trying to return our nation's and our global sense of farming to something more aligned with what Mother Nature had in mind, so that we can keep providing healthy food for ourselves sustainably, in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. But I can never let go of I can never forget that I came to know of you because of Twitter, of all things, which is in many ways considered pretty toxic and kind of gross. But in a lot of ways, I mean, and even specifically through Wendell Berry Twitter, like it was through following, my favorite Luddite, and those of us that are his disciples of that mentality. I discovered this mouthy Lake District shepherd that I thought, oh, this guy's funny and interesting. And soon enough, we became friends over Twitter. And that has led us to, a really healthy and fruitful friendship. And so it's something that I often struggle with over the years that I've been involved online in general. It's weird for me being a guy with a wood shop and having the interests that I do that are perhaps more purist in some ways than just like chasing fame and fortune or some of the more superficial things that people on TV shows might sometimes pursue. I obviously am engaged in that world, but I also maintain my wood shop and I try to avoid corporate mentality and profit above all else and industrialism as much as possible. But at the same time, my friendship with you and your household leads me to rely on your incredibly curated Instagram feed. I've said for years that it's by far my favorite TV channel. And you're so incredible at it. I mean, and it's something that I had ambitions where I was like, oh, I'm going to try and become good at this. And pretty quickly was like, okay, this is not for me. I'm better at making tables or making people laugh or writing a dumb song. And so I often wonder, because I'm aware of your workload, because you often creatively detail your workload as part of your reportage. How do you feel about your relationship with your Instagram channel? Because it's gorgeous. I mean, when you go out for a walk or a ride and just show us the expanse of your farm, let alone all the other things you get up to when you walk us through your menu or the party that you're throwing. I mean, it's Martha Stewart should be looking up to what you do with your channel. But I'm curious if how you feel about it, if it's enjoyable or if it's a burden or some of each.
So when I started sharing my world, my view on Instagram of my photographs and videos, it was through the pandemic, when I started writing, and it was so warmly received by such an amazing community of people that messaged me and said thank you for giving us a view of the Lake District and of your farm and letting us into this world and seeing it's a tonic, it's relief, it's something, to brighten our days. Messages were coming in from apartments in New York to people in Madrid, Australia, gosh, all across. I mean, a real wide variety of people follow along. And there are moments where I feel like I haven't got anything fresh to say, or I feel like, oh, I've taken this view 100 times already. But the weather always changes and there's always something fresh to see. And I think Wendell's work has taught me this more than anybody, that when noticing the small things and appreciating the little things is so, so rewarding. And for me, when I think of what I'm seeing out on my walk, I'm thinking it's a kind of artistic kind of creation of putting a story together or photographs together that of little things that I notice that other people like, how the ice is forming on the leaves, or what the path's looking like covered in mud or something, or the dogs chasing around. And because I keep getting lovely messages and lovely support for it, I just keep going, and I do it when I come in for a coffee or a cup of tea, and I'll sit down, you know the chair well, Nick, in our living room, it's by the fire. I've got a rocking chair and I've got a view of the garden. And I like to just take 10 minutes there and put a few things on. It doesn't take much out of my day. It doesn't dominate how I think about the world or what I'm doing. It's sort of an extra that I know that you're probably checking in, and my brother's probably checking in from South Korea. And there's a few other people that I really care about, that it helps me keep in touch with my really close friends. And then a wide range of people that I've never met before. And how lucky am I that people are interested in my tiny life here in the Lake District, just kind of keeping home and doing the doing on a farm. I feel really lucky. And I never really feel like it's a bind or a responsibility or I'm making content. You see all these content creators and having to post so many reels and stories to get engagement. I'm not interested in any of that. The word for me with my Instagram is authentic. It always has to run through my mind. Is it authentic? Am I just taking a snapshot of what I'm doing? And will it brighten somebody's day that maybe somebody's in hospital? And that happens quite often, that somebody will message me saying, thank you, I couldn't get outside today, and you've given me a tiny glimpse of your world today. And I love that. And then again, like the stories in the book, people are responding in that way. It's giving a glimpse into a world that they might not know about. And I think stories connect us, and don't we all need a bit more connection and feel a bit more rooted to real things?
Yes, I mean, and so representing your growing fandom, let me just offer my thanks and reassure you that even when you, and one of the great things about your authenticity is that you'll say, sometimes you'll say, I feel crappy today, or I'm having a bad day. So here's a leaf or whatever. And it's so appreciated. Every leaf, every scrap, we thank you for. But also I for my own part, and I'm sure all of us would never want you to feel pressured. We would never want to have you feel the slightest negativity about, like, oh God, the piglets need their milk. All of us that are creative, we should make what we want to and what makes us feel good.
Exactly.
And then when we run out, that's okay.
Yeah, exactly, Nick. For me, it's a visual sort of, it's my memories as well. When I look back at what I've shared, sometimes it's like it's a diary. And quite often it's really useful if I need to remember the day that a calf was born, so that I can record its ear tag and date of birth with the official system in the UK. And I can go through my photographs and say, oh, right, it was on that date. And I use it in lots of different ways, but it's a little creative outlet. And I would say adds to my life rather than takes from me. So as long as it's doing that, I will tickle away at doing, bits and pieces as I go along. And it's good fun.
Well, I mean, from my point of view, where everybody generally with a productive life can probably say that they feel like they wear a lot of different hats, or I like to say I always have a lot of plates spinning in my circus act. And so as somebody who's a bit of a polymath, I do this, I do that. I really admire your ability to engage as fulsomely as you do without having it become a negative thing. So hats off. I want to shift to, even though we're somewhat preaching to the choir, since this is through the channel of the Berry Center. part of when I first read Wendell's stories about 30 years ago, I began writing him letters and asking him to let me adapt his stuff to the screen or, to the stage. And he said, no, thank you. But through that conversation, I've said over the years, all I ever want to do is take this information, take this beautiful writing, which I now include the books of yours and James, and help get the word out. You have done this great work, and I have whatever audience I have as a cheerleader. And so here we are, and that's what I'm so glad to be participating in. And so since I will then try to get more people besides Barry Center subscribers to tune into this talk, let's talk about food. Let's talk about sort of the foundation of where all of this ideology comes from. Give me your soapbox on why do you care about food in the way you do? How do you feel about the way it's perceived in England versus America? And why go to all the trouble that you and James go to farm in a way that might be perceived as more difficult than the industrial choices?
Okay, so I grew up on a mixed farm. We had dairy cattle and beef and sheep, and we had horses, chickens, a vegetable garden, a full system around us that provided everything we needed to live. And my grandma cooked from scratch. She cooked all the meals and she had some help on the farm as well inside. And they worked with the seasons. She just knew what to do at different times of the year, whether it was making the jams and chutneys and marmalades, and then curing the hams and using all the produce. And we used to have apples in our attic, and they were stored carefully on newspaper and not allowed to touch each other. And I had to go and take any rotting ones out and crawl across the lines of the paper. And I didn't appreciate the food and how good it was as a child. And then as I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so supermarkets came in. There was a great big supermarket at the edge of town. We'd go and do the big shop with Mum, and everything started coming in packets. And we were slow to adopt some of these things, but we certainly did try them and had all sorts of various things make their way into the pantry, because Mum's life got busier and she wasn't able to sort of employ anybody in the house to help her like my grandma had done. There was fewer hands on farms to do the work. Everything became more challenging to make a living. Everybody was up against it that bit more. And so we relied on more bought products to eat, packets of ready meals and things you'd stick in the toaster with unusual fillings in, and frozen food. And when I moved down to Oxford with James in my 20s, I took him on a shopping trip. We were going to load up our trolley and get all sorts of different things. And I was interested in making things I'd seen on TV and cooking all sorts of different things. But what I found was, after a time, the simple things were the best results. The things that were in season had the best flavour. And I made us all sorts of meals, but the best things that we ate were lamb chops, where we'd bring some lamb back from home, or we'd get some joints of beef and cook a roast dinner, and I'd have friends over. And so my love of food came in it went through a funny sort of wave, really, where I didn't appreciate it, bought lots of junk and probably ate badly for a while, and then really started to learn about it. But mostly in more recent years, with the journey we've been on taking on the farm from his parents, we have become interested in regenerative agriculture because we have understood that as farmers, we have been part of the problem of changing things and not looking after the hedgerows. And we've been under economic challenges and such like, but we can also be part of the solution now going forwards. We can cut out our use of pesticides and fertilizer and look after the soil. So both of us have been on a journey when we took the farm on to really understand what we had here and the biodiversity that we've got here, all the different plants in the hay meadows, all the different species of trees and things in the hedgerows, and how to look after it. And I don't think it's widely understood by the public now, because we've had such cheap food for so long, of everything available to us at all times of year, that we haven't understood when things are in season and when we should be preserving and bottling. We've lost the old ways, haven't we, I think, with food. So part of me adding my voice to this conversation with the recipes is to get back to thinking about traditional home cooking, use a few good ingredients and make some really good, simple meals. And there's a big disconnect between people trying to make a living and trying to race around and keep a roof over their heads and feed their kids. And then there's what's happening on the land. And we need to join the dots up and understand that cheap food is having detrimental effects on the fields that feed us, with industrial food production. And I'm really passionate about trying to help people learn. So when we bring school groups onto the farm, we get the kids looking at the soil and looking for earthworms, the simplest things, and then talk about grass as solar panels and how we can protect our soil with lots of cover over it and all the simple, essential things that we need to look after soil. Because once we look after the soil's going to look after us. And I fear for the direction it's heading in the UK at the moment, as I guess you'll know much more about how it's going in America. It's agriculture of this kind, small scale, mixed farming, livestock on the fields, putting that golden hoof, that manure into the soil, hedgerow management, river management, all the essential land stewardship skills aren't valued by the government and the general public, because everybody's so up against it. They haven't got time to look up and see sort of the bigger picture. Like a holistic picture is what I'm interested in. Like, if we invest in looking after our land properly, grow healthy food that we cook and nourish each other with, then it's going to have an absolutely wonderful effect on our health. And that's better for like cutting all these problems down in the healthcare system and later illnesses. And we're only just starting to understand properly about ultra processed food and what that does to our gut health and our gut microbiome and how dangerous that is going forwards. We need to really, really think about eating whole foods that are full of nutrients, and that comes from healthy soil. So I guess that's my soapbox, Nick. I know you're on the same page with all of this, as are lots of the viewers of this. But that's where I'm coming from, joining the dots up, because home cooked food around the table is much more than just calories, fueling us, keeping us going. It's all sorts of things. It has a knock-on effect on the land, knock-on effect on our health and our connections with each other and healthy relationships within families. And I'm really interested in all sorts of things like that as well.
Well, thank you for that. I always, when I get into this conversation with people that aren't familiar, I always recommend Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivores Dilemma, as a great beginning to educate us as to like all of the fallacies about what we think about the food in the grocery stores and at different tiers, let alone food at fast food restaurants and so forth. there's so much in what you just said. I love that image of the apples meticulously spread out, to be preserved. And something that Wendell also writes so beautifully about is understanding the value and cost of all of these items beyond the price tag, and the incredible value of those apples, that the fact and anything that you can grow yourself, the simple value nutritionally of a potato that you've cultivated yourself. On so many levels, it's such a treasure beyond the price tag, having to do with not supporting the military industrial complex, the fact that there are no chemicals in that potato, just on and on and on. And also the sort of frugality that those apples bespeak. It's a household and a lifestyle where you spend time taking care of cultivating your foodstuffs, which is a more robust and healthy way to live. And as you said something so valuable, but it's having a family meal around the table. I mean, even that has become so disposable. And all of those things add to fortify our sense of values or lack thereof. In America, I mean, we've sold away our natural resources to the robber barons and the captains of industry that are still generally lauded. Like the majority of, I think, Western civilization still thinks, oh, these billionaires, those are the real heroes. Like that's what we've been indoctrinated to think, is they've figured out how to hoard the most money, so they should be looked up to. And those of us that come from honest labor and from simple the simple foundational machinations of health and food and farming systems, which I come from a farming family myself. Thankfully we've never completely drunk that Kool-Aid. And so I'm very grateful, again, in the nuanced conversation. One great thing about the internet, for example, is that we can find families like yours and work like yours, good work that can inspire us to say, and there's that guy, Will Harris, who has White Oak Pastures in Georgia. He's got that great new book, and which I don't know if the Berry Center is even maybe they'll be having one of these with him, but it's called The Subtle Art, or Return to the Subtle Art of Giving a Damn. There are these voices that are saying, look, I've had the ability, the good fortune to be able to, for example, your household has had successful book sales. My household has had successful TV jobs. That allows me to try to make my wood shop more holistic. It keeps the computers and the robots and the industry out of my wood shop, and it keeps the combines and the hormones off of your farm. And so I'm very grateful that we're able to then take your sort of experimental, what you guys are doing. You're trying with a growing movement to show that it's more sustainable and healthier, just in every way. It affects climate change. It affects national, bodily health, soil health, et cetera. And it touches everything. If you start with food, it touches all of these issues. And so, as a dumbass, like, song and dance man, who's lucky enough to just have an interest in this and I've been able to befriend you and your family, I'm so grateful that I found you, and that you all have had the inspiration to do what you do and communicate it to us. am so thrilled to get to help promote this book. I think that this book and another, I mean, since that's ultimately what we're doing is turning people on to your general conversation, but also putting your book in homes. Another sales pitch is the book is also rife. How many recipes are there in the book?
I think there's about 50 recipes dotted through the stories. So the stories, it's a real eclectic mix of food. It's not like a seasonal cookbook. It's not something you'd expect when you pick up A Farmer's Wife they're not all traditional kind of old-fashioned things. They are practical, easy recipes. There's a frittata when you've got a glut of, what do you call them, zucchini, don't you? We call them courgette. Mm-hmm. Courgette, onion, potato, eggs. It's a lovely, lovely summer dish. There's beef stew. I've put in sausage rolls and shortbreads and like things that you can make with what might be in your pantry or your larder. I know you like the sausage rolls, Nick.
I do.
Yeah. And soup. We all need simple soup recipes, or we all need to know how to make soup. I'm a big one for getting kids to learn how to cook. And thinking of future projects, I would like to open up more kind of cooking on the farm and using the produce that we've got and getting children to see how to make things from scratch. Because I get frustrated with the school system. Isaac is 11, our third child. Oh, it's 4. He goes to school in town and they have 3 lessons to make a fruit salad. First, to have a demonstration to be shown how to cut the fruit. The second lesson the next week is how to do it themselves. And the third lesson is an evaluation of what they would do better. And I'm yawning at this point thinking they could have made so many things in 3 hours of lessons over 3 weeks. So I'm passionate about trying to help kids learn, because I want to have the children here that I'm raising to be able to go out there and feed themselves from a few basic ingredients. And I want to inspire people to cook more. It's so rewarding. It shouldn't be seen as a chore like it has been for so long, as something to get away from. Because you cook, Nick, don't you? You do barbecue, and we're waiting for an invitation to get over there and enjoy some of your grilling.
All right, I'll get that in the mail. I do. I love cooking, and Megan, my wife, has become an incredible cook. Specifically mastering pies, and she makes her own crust from scratch. And the thing we've learned, the more and more that we get to do it, is I kick myself, because when I was younger, I also was focused on working as an actor and everything but maintaining an economic household. And so as the more and more that we learn these things, my best friend and I only, later in our lives, we learned about smoking our own meats. And for the first time, when I made pulled pork, when I smoked a pork shoulder butt, I was so elated at what a wonderful and easy and ancient technique it was, and so delicious. And we were just kicking ourselves, because when we used to live together in our 20s, my best friend and I, we just were jackasses, and we would like sit around and watch movies and order food, order in, and for less money, we could have been having so much more pleasure and health and nutrition if we had just taken the time to line up the soup pot or the grill or what have you. I mean, that's one of the things we've come to feel like we need to cram as much distraction through all of these different distraction channels into our days. And what I've learned and love continuing to learn is making a soup or a stew, whether it's easy or difficult, or making any dish or running anything on the grill. I love to grill. That is just as enjoyable as anything that I can watch on TV. Yeah. But at the end of it, I get a cheeseburger.
Exactly. You have something to eat. You have something to share with your loved ones. You have done something that I think cooking gets me into a flow where I forget lots of other things because I have to focus on the thing that I'm cooking. I have to just be present, get into the flow of making that. It's hugely enjoyable for me. And at the same time, as a mum of 4, it is a chore sometimes that I think, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if somebody else made something? That's why I'm training up the kids. And I've left my second daughter B making our evening meal tonight. And she had some rice on the go and some chicken, some broccoli, just what was in the fridge. And she'll make something or other with that. And it's simple. And let's cheerlead how good like cooking from scratch is. And let's look at those packets that we pick up maybe now and again and think, what's in that? Is that nourishing me or is that poisoning me? Those are the 2 words I'd have in my mind when I'm looking at in the grocery store.
Yeah, that's something that I really have loved getting to know your 4 kids. They're all such incredible personalities, but I really admire the way you raise your kids. They are good kids. They're smart, and they all have their own dreams and wishes, but they're very, and they're kids, so of course that they're going to grouse now and again. But by and large, they are great cooks, and they're by and large a great help when they're not creating a tornado, which is a kid's right now and again. But
there's a lot of mess in the household that drives me really wild. But it's no perfect family, this. It just like, it's not some cozy fireside story, the book, it's real life. And the more honest we are about how real life is and the challenges we have raising kids and being in a partnership and all of the things of life, I think it's for the better for all of us to feel more connected and more understanding of each other, because nobody knows how anybody else is coping with difficult things. But if we can be a little more kind and a little more understanding of other stories and a bit more empathetic, and that's kind of what you say about the kids. I mean, they drive me wild most of the time. They've got opinions about everything, probably because we've had a lot of meals around the table and they all have something to say and they want to challenge. They like debates and they like ideas, and they're exhausting, to be honest.
Sure. But one might argue that if you're not tuckered out, then maybe you're not living the best life you can be. It's something that you do, I think, a great job of pointing out in your book. That you say there's a lot of this that's beautiful and pastoral and idyllic on the surface, but there's also a lot of hardship. There's a lot of heartbreak. There's a lot of toil, but ultimately there's just no place you would rather be. Like you are often often exhausted, but you wouldn't trade it for a second. And I wanted to finish my pitch of the recipes in the book. Not only is there this great foundation of recipes presented, but you, together with your editor, have placed them strategically. So you'll get an anecdote, and is maybe harrowing or heartbreaking, and then and it wraps up, and then you get beef stew recipe. And so there are places in the book where I'd finish, some dramatic story, and then it was the recipe that I was like, oh God. And then there's ham hock and bean stew. Oh my God. So it's just
a bit of light relief in there. Bringing in that light relief and bringing in those recipes, because food is what my days revolve around food. And I just wanted to add my collection of things that I make regularly and connect us all, and things that I can pass down to the kids, and the whole picture, really. I'm so, so grateful, Nick, for you sharing my work and on here and the Berry Centre. Just overwhelmed with gratitude, really, because I didn't ever imagine that it would be reaching far and wide. My words that I wrote on a tiny desk in the corner of our bedroom, when the house was noisy and chaotic, I'd run upstairs and I'd type away a scene, and it's been hugely cathartic for me, as kind of getting to like 45 years old, thinking, where have I come from? What are the decisions I've made along the way? And where am I now? And as you say, I absolutely wouldn't have done anything different. I wouldn't choose anything different. I wouldn't choose to live a different way. And quite often I've felt, in my younger years, say 10, 15 years ago, not really worthy in my own sort of sense of self. I kind of did everything the way that James and I's values sort of fell into line. We both had the same values on life, but I didn't feel really like worthy enough. And I guess that's all the outside influences coming in. It's the magazines, the TV, it's things you read and films you watch, and didn't really show my life as being something to cheerlead about. It was something quiet and invisible and something not kind of important. And through writing the stories and going on that journey of putting together the book, I've just gone, I've always known it was good, but my goodness, it's good. It's and it's important, and I want to shout from the rooftops. Yeah, so I am. Thank you. I'm just so grateful that you've given me, time and sharing the stories, really.
Well, it's all of us that benefit from it, that are grateful, and I look forward to the work you'll continue to do, because it's a matter, it's a slow, inexorable trudge to bring, if we can help bring the conversation back around to regenerative food systems and all of the values that brings with it. It's obviously, as I said at the beginning of my last book, I'm going to talk to you about soil health, and all of my alarms go off and say, this is not good television. Like this is not the sexy fare that you're perhaps known for. And so nonetheless, it's the only conversation ultimately worth having. And so I think everyone are so grateful to you for your heroic contributions. And so thank you so much for writing this book, and we'll look forward to more.
I don't know if I've got a lot of time for any more at the moment, Nick, but I'm absolutely thrilled to bits with how things are going. And the response is so far so good, and really grateful to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you very much to the Berry Center for having us. And everybody, get to know your food. Find your farmers in your area. See if you can get your meat and eggs and dairy and produce without involving any airplanes.
Thank you again, Helen and Nick, for this beautiful discussion, and thank you at home for tuning in. If you're interested in picking up a copy of The Farmer's Wife, My Life and Days, or any other book mentioned here tonight, for yourself or a friend, visit berrycenterbookstore.com. You can also find more from the Berry Center on social media, especially Instagram. While you're there, click the follow or subscribe button for more, or sign up for our newsletter and mailing list at berrycenter.org. Our thanks for joining us tonight, and we wish you a very happy holiday season. From all your friends here at the Berry Center, good night.